Good afternoon. My name is Jamil Fletcher. I am a senior gift manager here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I am delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's program entitled, Historically Speaking, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? An Asian American Story of Love, Marriage, Motherhood, and Running a Billion-Dollar Empire by Loida Lewis. In this fascinating memoir, Mrs. Lewis shares her personal journey as a daughter, wife, mother, immigrant lawyer, philanthropist, CEO, and civic leader. At the heart of this book is her love story with the iconic Reginald F. Lewis, the first African-American billion-dollar deal maker. We will begin the program with an invocation from Mrs. Lewis's nephew, Mr. Russell Fugett. We are also honored to have Dale Lefebvre, founder and chairman of the private equity firm 35711, introduce Mrs. Lewis. Mr. Lefebvre is a noted philanthropist who, among many other roles, past and present, is a current member of the Smithsonian Board of Trustees. We are also delighted to have New York Times bestselling author Dolan Perkins Valdez join us to engage in a lively conversation with Mrs. Lewis about her extraordinary book. Please welcome to the stage Russell Fugett.
Good afternoon. First, I have to start out, as you heard the wonderful introduction that Mr. Fletcher just gave, I want to start by honoring all the mothers. If you can stand, if you're a mom, if you're an aunt, if you're a godmother, can you stand? We're 1 week post Mother's Day. I want to thank all of the mothers. Yeah. And I do that in memory of my grandmother, Carolyn Fugett, the mother of Reginald F. Lewis, who recently left us on this earth in February. And I know she would be so excited to be here today and so excited to have all of you here today. I want to start by doing a few thank yous. First, I want to thank the host committee who's worked tirelessly. Dolan Valdez Perkins was a part of that as well, and you'll get to hear from her in a minute. I also want to thank Marissa Jennings, my cousins Christina Lewis and Leslie Lewis, who could not be here today, my wonderful wife, Seela Fugett, and also Mr. Mark Littlejohn. Thank you, everyone, for making this day possible. And also want to thank the museum staff, Deidre Cross, Miriam Grott Jacobs, Michaeline, John Powley, and of course, Mr. Jamil Fletcher, who just did a wonderful introduction. Please give all of them a round of applause. Thank you so much, everyone, for making this day possible. Thank you to our friends who are tuning in to the live stream on YouTube. We want to honor and remember you as well. Now I want to begin today with a brief prayer. If everyone could please bow their heads. Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for all of its many blessings. Thank you for all the graduations and the festivities that are happening all around us. I just pray that your presence will be here with us today. May your presence fall in this room. May each of us, as we hear the conversation that will take place today with Mr. Blair Walker, with my Aunt Loida Lewis, with my sister Dolan, that we will get a fresh revelation as to who you are as our Father God. So I thank you for this day. I thank you for all the insight and the wisdom that will be imparted upon us, and that it will sow a seed in our heart to understand who you are and how you can move through us and in us as you move in the life of my aunt, of my sister Dolan, of Mr. Blair Walker, and of our family. May us be united as family, those of us in here today, those of us who are watching, those of us who are taking part. And I just pray that we'll just feel a sense of joy, a sense of laughter, a sense of peace, and that the insight and wisdom we gain will truly take root and move us forward from this day. In Christ's name I pray, amen. Now I want to introduce someone who's become my fast friend and brother in the last 30 minutes. We've been backstage, Mr. Dale Lefebvre, as you heard, who is a milestone donor at this museum, a brilliant brother, and his life's work as a financier and as a philanthropist has really been inspired by the legacy of my uncle Reginald F. Lewis and my aunt Loida Lewis. So without any further ado, Dale, will you come on out and join us? Thank you, everyone.
You never want to follow the hot preacher in a church. That's just a bad, bad look. I am so honored to be here today to be able to introduce two of my teachers. The first one, Dolan Perkins, NAACP Image Award winner, New York Times bestseller of Winch and others. And of course, Miss Loida Lewis, who fundamentally changed my life, both with her humility and the continuation of a legacy that we're sitting in today. This museum wouldn't be here without her. We're in the Oprah Winfrey Theater. I mean, it's in D.C. Like, we're across from the Treasury. None of this is supposed to happen, but yet it has. And finally, Mr. Walker, who is a continuity between why should white guys all have the fun and why should guys all have the fun. I'm not going to waste your time with anything else other than bringing out the three people who we're all here to see: Miss Lewis, Mr. Walker, and Miss Perkins.
Hello. So wonderful. Welcome to Washington, D.C. Mrs. Lewis and Mr. Walker, thank you for coming. And thank you to everybody for coming today. What a beautiful day, spring day here in the D.C. area. I am so excited to be here with the two of you. I read this book and couldn't put it down. You can see my little Post-it notes here. And I was so inspired. I went to bed thinking about the book. I woke up thinking about it. Mr. Walker, you did a fantastic job collaborating with Mrs. Lewis, putting this all together. Full circle moment for you. How does it feel to be back writing another Lewis story after, how many years ago was it that you wrote Mr. Lewis's book?
That was roughly 30 years ago. Loida and I have been friends for 3 decades. She was instrumental in her husband's book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? I mean, it really wouldn't have taken off had it not been for Loida. And we have just talked over the years, and about 5 years ago, she said, you know, I really need to tell my story. And as I started to interview her and sort of collect a string about her life, which has been amazing, and her achievements, which have been even more remarkable, it was clear that she had a story that I feel, she may disagree with this, is on par with Reginald F. Lewis's story. So it's been a labor of love. It hasn't been a job. It's been working with a friend of 30 years to tell her life story. And she lived an incredible life.
What an incredible life. Yes, and I want to go back to the beginning, Mrs. Lewis. Can we start in the Philippines? Can we just go right back?
First of all, thank you very much to all of you who took time from your Sunday afternoon to be here. So I want you to give yourself a big hand of applause for being here. Thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge, well, the African American Museum and my two hosts, Dolan Perkins, who is also a bestseller herself with her 3 novels about ancient America, or America during the slavery. Yes, Dolan Perkins and Dale Lefebvre, because the 2 of them is responsible for having us here in this Oprah Winfrey Theater. So thank you very much. And I just want to acknowledge my nephew who gave a beautiful invocation, Russell Fugate, bringing his best friend, Chris Tucker. And a special friend from Kappa Alpha Psi, Mr. Lewis Fraternity, Captain Bill. Where's Captain Bill? Captain Bill, yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, she wanted me to ask about the beginning. Well, as you can see from my accent, I'm not born in America. I was born in the Philippines, in a tiny town called Sorsogon. And that's chapter 1 in my book.
Yes, so we go back to the Philippines. You were very smart as a child. You were valedictorian of your high school class. You graduated college with honors. Your father had a dream, though, that he wanted you to go to law school. I want you to tell me, especially considering, the title of your book, what was it like in those days to be a smart and ambitious woman in the Philippines?
My father, I knew that I was bright, but it was never really, I'm different from everybody else. I just knew that I want to be number one in my class. So I was salutatorian in elementary school, which disappointed me because the valedictorian was the daughter of the principal. But I want to see to it that in high school, I'm number one. And I did, and I worked hard for that. My father was orphaned when he was 12, and he lived with a rich uncle. In the Philippines, that happens. In many society, that also happens. And he was in high school with his rich uncle, who was very entrepreneurial. He had a movie house, gassing station, construction work, and all that. So in my father's young mind, he would be an entrepreneur. But he also wanted to be a lawyer. He went to University of the Philippines, but did not finish law. And of the 5 children, he chose me, the first daughter. It's because I guess when he saw that I was more talkative, articulate, fearless, ambitious, he said, she will be my successor. So he wanted me to be a lawyer, and I did become a lawyer. I didn't get number 1 or number 2, just number 7 in our graduating class, but that was good enough.
So you go to law school, but you also had this little secret dream that you hadn't shared with with your family, and that was that you wanted to be a nun.
Yes. High school was with German nuns who came from Germany and was part of the group of foreigners or German nuns, Benedictine order. And for me, it was such a life that they would give up their life from their country and come to the Philippines, to this little town in Bicol, in the Philippines. And then for college, again, not Belgian, but not German, but Belgian nuns. And in my mind, what a great life to give your life in service of people. And so that's what I wanted to be a nun. And in fact, they gave me a date, July 4, 1960. I was second year law school. And I'm so glad my mother told me, Loida, you're second year, you have 2 more years to go. So why don't you finish your schooling, become a lawyer, and enter the convent? Because then the merchandise is in your head. I said, that's right. She makes sense. So I finished law school, passed the bar, and that's when destiny took its turn. That's chapter 1 in the book.
Well, I'm glad you listened to your mom because you wouldn't be here. So here's another question. Okay, I'm going to fast forward a little bit in the interest of time. You finish law school. Your father sends you and your mom on a worldwide tour. You land in New York City. You're enjoying the city. You're going to Broadway shows. And you decide to stay for a while. Your sister's at Columbia University. And you get set up on this blind date with this young lawyer, Harvard Law graduate. I want to know, what were your first impressions of Mr. Lewis?
Well, I was working, although I have a tourist visa, with a law student civil rights research council. At that time, 1965, immigration didn't care. And because my boss, Ray Glover, was a Harvard Law graduate, tall, dark, and handsome, I introduced him to my sister. And he was fast. They were growing out on a date immediately. So that Friday, my boss said, Loida, why don't we have a double date? My sister, your sister, and me, and then you with a blind date. I said, blind date? I've never had that before. Sure, why not? And that's when I met Mr. Lewis. So what was my first impression? As we were going out the door, he held my hand here. Philippines is very conservative. You don't touch anybody. So as soon as he touched my hand, I said, fresh. But during the conversation in West Boondocks, that's a restaurant that serves soul food. And I was so surprised. They have ham hocks. We have that too in the Philippines. So that's what I ordered. And then what did he order? A bottle of champagne, French champagne. That impressed me. And anything he said, I had something to say. And whatever I said, he had something to say. So we sort of had a synchronicity. That's chapter 2 in the book.
But you have to read the book to find out more. I wanted to ask the same question to you, Mr. Walker. What was your first impression when you met Mr. Lewis?
I never actually had the honor of meeting him. I wrote the book after he passed, and I had a lot of regrets about that. But you know, if someone tells me that Dolan has a certain characteristic, you know, she's very brilliant or, you know, a wonderful writer, and then I'd interview and 2 or 3 other people say the same thing, after a while a mosaic starts to materialize. And so I interviewed over 100 people. I was working as a reporter with USA Today at the time, and I took a leave of absence from that job because I just wanted the world to know about Reginald Lewis and his accomplishments. I just felt it was critical for people to understand what he had achieved. And after a while, you know, a very vivid picture began to emerge of this man. And I understand why Loida was captivated by him immediately when she met him.
Okay, let me just give an explanation. When we moved to Paris, after my working with immigration for 10 years, I said, it's too bad that I left immigration, that was my work, but I have 10 years of experience. So I said to myself, I better write a book, How to Get a Green Card. And so while I was typing it, I learned how to do the computer through my daughter. Mr. Lewis would go to his office, pass by me. Usually I stand up and say, goodbye, darling, see him to the door, and then go back working. But one time, I was so busy typing, I didn't know that he was there. And so he stopped and said, oh, you're writing your book, I'm jealous. So I said, darling, you have a story to tell. Please, write it. He did not do typing or computer. He wrote it as a lawyer on legal pad. And that's the book that he was going to write. But sadly, he died before he could finish it. And so for me, everybody in the world should know about him. A man of modest means, raised by a single mother, and yet he was able to reach the very top of corporate America, buying a billion-dollar company, 64 companies in 31 countries for $1 billion, an African American. And so I had to look for the right co-author. And then Blair Walker had this full-page ad of Mr. Lewis when he died. I said, he's the man. In fact, when I called him, he said, I knew it was going to be me. That's why, yes, please, yes. And this is the book, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Yes. How Reginald Lewis created a billion-dollar business empire, the first American, not just black or white, the first American who bought on a leveraged buyout, meaning all borrowed money, $1 billion, outside the United States, international. And I knew that his life is going to be not copied, but will inspire a lot. And that was 1995 when it came out. And since that time, every time I would talk about it, or every time I would meet somebody who's a successful businessman, and one of them is Dale Lefleur, they would say, Mrs. Lewis, I read the book of your husband, I changed my career. Or I changed my trajectory. Or I started my own business. So it was so important that Blair interviewed more than 150, I think, and that's why the book came out. So I'll go back to, it was a bestseller, around 30,000 read it, but in 1992, December, I called Blair. Blair, I'm turning 80 by the end of December. Yes, I'm 80 years old. So I thought, Blair, you know half of my life. You have to help me finish the other half, my beginning and after Mr. Lewis died. And I'm so glad Blair said yes. So please give him another big hand of applause. Thank you. Thank you, Blair.
So I'm being told that they're going to be circulating index cards if you have a question, and also if you are watching online at home, you can submit questions online as well. So, yes, it goes without saying, Mr. Lewis is and always will be a titan in American history. I want to get back to you, though, Mrs. Lewis, because as a mid-career professional woman, I found so much in this book for me as a woman, right? I wanted to talk about your years as an immigration lawyer. You recount how after you married your husband, you were coming back into the U.S. through Honolulu, and you got detained at the border. And at that moment when, Mr. Lewis sailed through and you got detained, and they were asking you all these questions, and you were just answering them truthfully, you decided that you wanted to fight for immigrants to this country. Tell me about your years as an immigration lawyer at INS.
Well, I'll explain that. Mr. Lewis came to the Philippines to marry me. Isn't that so romantic? But we were going to leave as soon as we get married. So my father hired an agent, a travel agent, to get me a tourist visa so that as soon as we get married, I'm off to the United States. And that's what happened. But in Hawaii, at the immigration, of course, he was on the American citizen line. I was on the foreigners line, tourist. And when the immigration officer asked, how long do you intend to stay? I said, permanently. I just got married. Oops. So I was detained. Why? Because if you have a tourist visa, that means you lied with the immigration. But I never faced American embassy. And so I was, it was a delay. I went to, it took 1 year. I had to be interviewed in New York. And in my mind, here I am, a lawyer, and I get detained by immigration. So I know every Filipino who would come would need an immigration lawyer. And so that's why I decided to specialize in immigration.
And you had many successful years as a lawyer. I was really intrigued, your decision to step away from your career eventually. It was not because, you didn't want to do it anymore. It was not because, Mr. Lewis was making more money. It was because it took a toll on your health trying to have it all and do everything. And I think this is something a lot of us are more vocal about now, about burnout. Can you talk a little bit about your decision to step away eventually?
All right. Well, first, I'll answer the question you didn't ask. How did I get hired by Immigration and Naturalization Service?
Well, we don't have that much time, so that's why they have to read the book.
Yeah, no. I just want to tell people that when you know who you are, you fight for it with the government, because privately, it's a little different. So when I got notice that immigration is hiring 11 lawyers to come to immigration, I said, oh, that's excellent. Why? Because I knew that that those who studied law at Harvard or Yale or Stanford would not come to immigration. My school, University of the Philippines, is allowed to take the bar and be a lawyer in the United States because our studies in the College of Law, University is equal to an American law school. That's why when it was available to me, I took the bar, I passed the bar, and I applied.
First Asian American woman to pass the New York State bar without having studied law in the United States. Isn't that amazing?
But when immigration didn't take me, I said, why not? I'm good. So I sued them for immigration. I sued them for discrimination on national origin, on race, and on gender. And when I had, no, not yet. And when the immigration judge was listening to my case, he said, all right, immigration lawyer, meaning to say, who's representing the immigration, show me the 11 biodata of those you selected so that I can compare Ms. Lewis' biodata. And in 6 months, immigration didn't submit it, 0. So the judge made a decision. Because in law, if you are asked to submit a document or testimony and you don't submit it, the assumption is that it's against you. So, and that's what the judge says. It seems like her qualifications are this, so she has been discriminated against, and so immigration give her 3 years back pay, and I got 3 years back pay. But when Mr. Lewis bought this Beatrice International, he decided that we should live in Europe because that's where the bulk of the business would be. And so I said goodbye to immigration, and because of all the knowledge I have, I wrote a book, How to Get a Green Card. It's still published on its 14th edition. So those of you who's interested how to get a green card, it's still Amazon. It's available at Amazon.com.
That's right. You actually just transitioned to your career as a writer, is what you did, and like you said, that book is still in print. It's wonderful. I wanted to ask you also about so recently, Michelle and Barack Obama have been very vocal about their marriage in a way that we all can really appreciate, right? And you are very honest in this book about the struggles of your marriage. What advice do you have for married couples in terms of us dealing with some of the stresses of marriage?
Well, first, it was tough to deal with a man who, when he's angry, comes out with SHIT, an MF, an FUCK. It was hard. And I'm so glad that his mother understood me and said, Loida, don't worry about that. Just go to the bathroom, spit on it, and flush it. You'll feel better. So that's the beginning. And then later on, he would say, because, I myself my parents were always quarreling when I was growing up. And in my mind, if ever I get married, and I was planning not to get married, I will never have this answer. So when Mr. Lewis and I would quarrel, I would not talk. I will just answer him in my mind. And he would say, I know what that silence is. That's aggressive silence. But when he told me, Loida, you don't know where I live, that really hurt me. Why? Because I consider myself a compassionate person. And what does it mean, you don't know where I live? So I started to look into myself. Mr. Lewis is African American, and slavery and bigotry and racism is endemic. It's in the system. So I understood that when he goes out, he's fighting the dragons and monsters of racism. And so when he comes home, he should not find a monster or dragon in the house. So what do I say? When he comes home late, I don't say, why are you late? No. Darling, have you eaten? And if you start, darling, you want a massage? I can do reflexology. Why? Because he's out there fighting all of this. And, as successful as he is, he's mistaken maybe for the waiter, or he's mistaken for, he drove a foreign car, and a policeman would stop him. All of that he's fighting out there. So when he comes home, he should find an oasis so that he could refresh himself and go out there and fight again. So those are some of the techniques. And may I say the last one?
Yeah, sure.
When we were living in Paris, he would be in New York for 1 month, and then Paris for another month. And he would be in New York, and then Paris. But one of those nights, after the children have gone to sleep, and it was just him and I, he said, Loida, I don't want you to hear it from anybody else, but I had dinner with so-and-so. She's a common friend, I know her. Beautiful, professional, accomplished, black, and sexy. Oh my God, my mind was like the ugly head of jealousy was there in me, and it was making me very, very, very sad, or very angry actually. And I finally confessed to one of the Irish women who was with me in my prayer group. And because she saw that I was suffering. And so I said, Loida, we are in a prayer group. Read the letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians about love. And that's, I think, the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13, 5-8. And what does it say? Love is patient. So I had to think, Loida, are you patient towards Reginald? Love is kind. So I had to look into myself. Am I kind? And I look at all the things that I've been doing. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not proud. Love does not keep a record of wrong. You know, for 1 whole month, I had integrated it in my system. And so I think I changed because now I know love is unconditional. And so he can do no wrong, honestly. So what if he sleeps with somebody else? I did not feel jealous anymore. And so when he came back, you know, I guess he found that I have changed myself. And so that last 4 years in Paris was truly the best years of our married life. And I think God gave that to me because in 5 years, he was gone. Mr. Lewis died after a short illness, but I will always have Paris.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Your spirituality has always, in all the years I've known you, it's been so inspiring. I don't want to get the timekeeper to tell me that we're out of time before you talk to us a little bit about spirituality and how it grounds you in the importance of your faith.
Well, of course, when the biopsy came, December 31, that it was brain cancer, lymphoma, I always had in my heart that if I ask God something, he will grant it. And then in 3 weeks, Mr. Lewis died. I was totally, really, not only out of sort, I was out of myself. I was not only depressed, I was discombobulated. I was out of this world. I was out of sort. But what saved me was that my belief that God will not abandon me. And Saint Isaiah's words, a mother may forget the baby on her breast, but even if she forgets, I will not forget you. So that gave me courage. And also, Isaiah again says that I hold you in the palm of my hand. So I may not be able to say, I never said, why me? For a few months, I could not say, thy will be done, because it was so painful. But I believed. I believe in a loving God. I believe that he will not abandon me. So it's almost like I was reaching for him, help me, and then for some reason, I knew that he's lifted me up, and I've been walking ever since.
So your husband passes away at age 50, and not long after that, I'm skipping the story a little bit here, you are elected chairwoman of the board, and you are tasked with finishing his dream with TLC Beatrice. I thought almost, you know, my favorite 3 chapters in the book probably were just hearing you recount how you did that. I want to know, one, did people doubt that you could do that? And did it feel good when you did it? And then 2, what do you wish you had known then that you know now?
Well, the first question is taking over. It was the farthest thing from my mind, and I will always be grateful to Gene Fugit, Mr. Lewis' brother, who took over in the midst of his in the midst of his grief, because they were very close. He took over as CEO, chair and CEO. It took me some time, but really what made it me sort of like time for you, Loida, to stop grieving and take responsibility was in our bedroom, I will always close the window with the curtain, and in the morning I would open it up again. But after 6 months, when I woke up, the window was up. I mean, what was it? My mother-in-law who was there helping me, my daughters, the help, our help, household help. Nobody did it. So I didn't anymore stop. I didn't anymore ask who did it. It was sort of for me a sign. The sun came in. So it's sort of like God telling me, all right, Loida, get ready, because today is another day. So I just want to tell that to everybody here, that we live life. There will be sacrifices, there will be tragedies, there will be pain, there will be failures, but the sun comes up. The sun will come up. The sun will come up tomorrow, meaning to say that song is our life. There will always be hope. Any problem has a solution. And so with that, I started to deal with what do we have here. The company was stuttering. It was close to bankruptcy. And so we interviewed 5 CEOs, but all of them were asking a lot of money. That's okay. They're going to have $1 billion company. They were all white. That's also okay. But none of them would give me the assurance, we'll make it work. All of them were saying, we'll try our best. In my mind, you'll try your best. What if it fails? So instead of pointing to them, I said, 3 fingers are pointing at me. I better take responsibility for the family. And that's the only time I decided to take over. Now you will say, your question, what did they say? Did they say you're a woman, you're a foreigner, I mean, you're an immigrant? No, because Mr. Lewis had the presence of mind to give us 51% of the shareholders. And therefore, if they say, we will not vote for you, I'll fire them off. And that's how I took over.
And you said you became known as the iron fist in a velvet glove. That's what they said?
Well, they did say that, but, yes, I've never run a company before, but I can ask the question, are we in the red, are we in the black? And we were in the red. We didn't have enough money to pay our corporate employees, but it's common sense. I don't have to be a rocket scientist. Your income is down. Your expenses are up. So simple. Increase income, reduce expenses, and that's what I did.
You make it sound so easy to run a $1 billion company. Maybe I should get one. You say it was 6 months after, it's amazing because all of us who've dealt with grief know that it takes so much longer and sometimes a lifetime, really. I know one of the questions that I always had about you was why you never married again. And you addressed that a little bit in the book, and I actually understand now. But can you just share with us why you didn't?
I don't have to share too much, because if you've been married to the king, why settle for a prince?
That's what my mom says about why she won't marry again. Hard act to follow. So where are we on time and questions? Thank you. Okay, so here is the first question. What advice do you have for young Filipino Americans who seek to succeed in this country? P.S. I graduated today from George Washington University. Congratulations!
Bravo!
Woo!
Congratulations! Yes. All right, so this is what I tell young people, that when they ask me, what is the secret to your success? So the first one is goal setting. I've always been, as you can hear from my answers, is that you set your goal. So you just graduated. What is your goal? To enter into your profession. And so you work hard to look at how do you get to your profession. Or simply, set your goal for this year, for the next 5 years. But always be flexible, because opportunities can come. So set your goal. The second one is obedience to a code of ethics. Because as you can see, many people are successful, but they did not pay their taxes, or they did something illegal, or they took a shortcut that was too shortcut. And so what happens is they get into trouble. And this is not only regarding profession, in your own personal life. When something inside you tells you don't do it, because God is within us. And if you are close to your heart, you will know that what you're going to do is not good. So obedience to a code of ethics. Number 3 is determination. So you have set your goal, you're going this way, but there will be many people who will say, what? You can't do it. Don't listen to them. Or even in your own mind, you will say, oh, it's too big, I can't do it. Take that vampire out of your mind. Why? Because you never know how much you can do and how high you can reach. And don't say, well, if I fail, so what? If you fail, it's another way of understanding where you failed. And so it's a process of education. So, number 3, determination. Don't let anybody, or don't let your own mind tell you you can't do it. Because once you say, I can't do it, you already failed. Always be positive. And I always tell friends, those who know algebra, isn't it? Plus 1 plus 1 equals 2. Arithmetic. 1 minus 1 equals 0. So why will you be on the 0? Why will you be negative on your own self? So if something, and for this young graduate, all right, just be determined that you're going to get there and do everything. If you have to sleep less, work hard, because you'll get there. Thank you. Okay. In order to remember these 3 secrets of success, goal setting is G. Obedience to a code of ethics is O. Determination is D. You put them together, it spells G-O-D, God. Because with God, everything is possible.
Love that. So many of the young people today are into social justice causes. When you, at one point when you were a young New Yorker, you were running a newsletter / publication that was critical of the Marcos regime. And your sister, I think, was detained in the Philippines for also being vocal and outspoken. What would you say to those young graduates about social justice advocacy and being fearlessly outspoken?
You have to choose your battle. Because if you're just starting and you're out there demonstrating, you know, if you are in a private company, it's not looked upon very well. So you've got to choose your battle. But for me, you know, getting people to vote, okay, but getting people to register and vote, you know, that's easily done, not easily, but you can encourage your own circle of influence of your friends. Because I do believe that whoever rules affect our daily lives. So it's important to be involved as much as you can without veering your attention away from where you want to go. So Mr. Lewis was not the one that was, you know, carrying placard, but because he had the money, he donated first to Jesse Jackson in a big way, because in 1984, that early, Jesse Jackson, an African-American, said, I'll run for president. And for him, that was very encouraging. And in fact, Blair, you know this. Mr. Lewis, because Jesse Jackson said, I'm going to run for president, that's the way he said, I'm going to do an LBO, leveraged buyout. And that's the first company he bought, which is McCall Pattern Company. And Blair, you want to talk about the McCall Pattern Company? Because that's his really first leveraged buyout, borrowing money to buy a company, $22.25 million.
I just want to take a very quick second to, again, thank Dolan for making this event possible. And for everybody, give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. But again, to the young graduate, and I want to sort of blend McCall into this also. There's nothing wrong with being woke. Some people want to make that a negative term, but we have been asleep in this country for over 400 years, and it's time to wake up. And that's something that Reginald Lewis was definitely not going to do, and that's why in 1984, when everyone felt that Jesse Jackson had zero chance of becoming president, he went out of his way to back him. And with a lot of help from Loida here, because he had events in his home to raise funds for him. And just from watching Jesse Jackson saying, I can do this, I am somebody, Reg Lewis said, I can buy the McCall Pattern Company. And he bought that for, it was roughly 22.5 million, all on borrowed money, as the LBO. And he was able to, when he sold it, it was for 84 million roughly. And all of his investors made a 99 to 1 return on their investment as a result of that. So, you know. So like Loida was saying, hard work, you know, having integrity, and just believing in yourself. And it sounds simple when you say it, but it's hard to do on a day-to-day basis. But those are the underpinnings, the pillars of success. They really are.
Thank you. Thank you, Blair.
Love that. There's a couple of questions about museums here. Someone wanting to know, you and your husband get in the business of supporting museums, and do you want a museum named after you?
Well, before Mr. Lewis died, because I think he had an inclination, just in case he dies, he dictated to his aunt, who was then running the Reginald Lewis Foundation, when the company has money, meaning to say, when the company, the TLC Beatrice company, goes public or is sold, he wants 10% of his estate to go to the museum. And he said, these are the things. And 5 million should go to an African American Museum of History and Culture. He died in 1993. In 2002, in the newspaper in Baltimore Sun, there was a news item that the government of the legislature of Maryland allocated $32 million to have an African American Museum of History and Culture, same name. And so we said, that's it. That's where we should put the 5 million. And so when Beverly Cooper, my aunt, talked to the chairman of this committee, raising money, he said, Mr. Lewis, in his letter said, we should donate 5 million to an African American Museum of History and Culture. What do we get in return? And he said, for 5 million, we will name the museum after him. Why was that? Because part of the law where Maryland legislature said we will allocate 32 million is the phrase, 3 million has to be raised in the African American community. And so he was giving 5 million. And I said to myself, wow, for 5 million, we got a whole museum. He did a leverage buyout, even in death.
I love that.
But no, do you want a museum named after me? No. You know, I do what I do because I know my reward is great in heaven, and that's good enough.
I think one of the questions here has to do with your legacy in the world of business. What do you believe your legacy is to the world of business?
Well, my legacy is especially to the women in this, you know, who's listening here, and to those who will read my book, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? An Asian American story of love, marriage, motherhood, and running a billion-dollar empire. My legacy is one, you can do everything out of love. Love conquers all. And that's why I married Mr. Lewis, because I fell in love with him. That's number one. Number two is that don't let failure stop you from doing what you do, because everybody fails, but you get up again. You will get up again. Don't ever say that, you know, you're down. You know, truly, everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
When you just said the title, it reminds me that we haven't really talked about motherhood. I want to just, you know, hear from you on how you were able to balance. I mean, you became a single mother. I mean, I know you had help, but you're still a mom. So what advice do you have for us about balancing it all, those of us who are parents?
Yes, it was rough, because the very first priority is my two girls. They were 9 and 12. So it was, I will be mother and father to them. Aside from that, there's the book to finish, there's the company to run. But, and then I was doing real estate too. So for the women especially, and for the men, you do have to establish priorities. What are your priorities? So as a mother to two girls, I was always there whenever, yes, I am CEO and having meeting, but instruction to all the assistants, to the secretaries. If any of my daughters call, I am there. I will stop everything. They have priority. So that's one. Secondly, Mr. Lewis and I have always emphasized to the girls as they were growing up. Two things: respect your elders, because that's very important in the African American community and in the Filipino community. Respect your elders. You can color your hair blue, okay? You can not fix your room, but be respectful to your elders, especially the mother. Okay, so that's one. Secondly, do your work. You're saying, they're students, they're small. Do your work means do what you have in front of you. You're a student. So, no television Monday to Thursday. Yeah, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, fine. But no television as they were growing up. Do your work. Do your best. If you cannot be number one, number two, just do your best. So those two things. And so my two daughters graduated from Harvard cum laude. And right now, my eldest daughter was an actor, so she wrote a one-woman show of the woman who was saved from the massacre in Rwanda, where the Tutsis were being massacred, 800,000. But she, being a Tutsi, was told by her father, before her parents were killed, to go to a Tutsi, to Hutu pastor, and she was saved by being hidden in a bathroom, 3 feet by 5 feet, with 7 other women. Okay, so that's my eldest daughter, and now she decided she's going to teach how to earn multi-generational wealth that black. Multi-generational wealth that black, because she understood, because of slavery, because black people were separated from buying homes, from getting businesses, that there is no intergenerational wealth. So Leslie, my eldest, is doing that. Whereas my other daughter started a not-for-profit to train black and brown boys. Why? Because when she was looking at who is teaching coding, there's girls who code, women who code, all for girls. So she said, this will be for black boys. And since 10 years ago, she started this, just during the summer, raising funds for training black and brown boys. That's 10 years ago. And many of her graduates are now working, earning 7 figures in Facebook or Meta, in Google, in Amazon.com, doing internet. So I'm very proud of them.
I love that. It's very inspiring. I remember you were the first woman CEO I knew, and I remember you always took your girls' calls, and you would say, you never are too busy for people who are a priority to you, and I've sort of carried that with me. Do we have any other questions? Where are we on time, timekeeper? Okay. Well, I am just so thrilled here. I want to tell y'all there's still more we didn't get to that's in the book. Please, it makes a great gift. It makes a great graduation gift. If you have a graduation gift you haven't given yet, very inspiring. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Well, we will be outside, Blair Walker and I, to sign this book, Why Should Guys Have All the Fun? An Asian American Story of Love, Marriage, Motherhood, and Running a Billion-Dollar Empire. Can I just say something? When the publisher and Blair said, Loida, why do you want to say Asian American? You're limiting the audience for your book. I said, now with the COVID and the Asian hate, I want everyone to know that I am Asian American, just like any one of them who have that Asian Americans are just like any American. We have our, failures and successes. We have our tragedies and joys. And so we are as American as anybody else, and why would anybody hate us? And that's why I said, put it in there. an Asian American story. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Walker, who will also be signing books. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Can we give Mrs. Lewis and our panel another round of applause, please? Please join us upstairs. You can purchase the book, and Mrs. Lewis will be signing books in the Heritage Hall, just upstairs on the entrance level.